I'm Terry Sanchez. It's my privilege to welcome you all here tonight. We're so excited to be presenting Nicola Harrison and her novel, Hotel Laguna. As always, I want to make sure I thank the Friends of the library. It is due to their generous sponsorship that we are able to host outstanding authors like Nicola Harrison. So thank you to the Friends. I'd like to also thank our bookseller, very fittingly, Laguna Beach Books, for being here tonight. If you are not one of the lucky 25 to arrive first and would like to purchase the book, you can do so at the conclusion of the program, and Nicola will be able to sign it as well. Books are $29 plus tax. We'll also have a short time of Q&A. So when you first entered, you probably saw the table with index cards. If you have a question, you can feel free to grab one. We'll also kind of come around. Sometimes you think of questions during the presentation, so you'll have a chance to write them down, and I'll be asking our author the questions from up here. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and set your cell phones to silent. So as I said, we're super excited to be presenting our guest author, Nicola Harrison. Hotel Laguna is her third historical fiction novel. Prior to writing novels, Ms. Harrison worked as a fashion journalist in New York City, where she lived for 17 years. Ms. Harrison was born and raised in England and moved with her family to Southern California when she was a teenager. She's a graduate of UCLA, and she received her Master's of Fine Arts from Stony Brook University. She now resides in Manhattan Beach, California, with her husband and 2 sons. Please join me in welcoming Nicola Harrison.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, thank you so much. This is so nice. I'm so thrilled to be here. I have to say, when I first started writing this book, Hotel Laguna, as I was sitting away typing, I sort of envisioned and dreamed that I'd be able to come and speak here at this beautiful library. It's so fun to speak to people who know and love the places that I write about, so this kind of feels like a full circle moment. So as they just mentioned, I grew up in England, and I moved here with my family. I went to University High School in Irvine, and then went to UCLA, uni. And then I lived in New York for 17 years, and I just moved back to the West Coast 3 years ago, and I'm just so happy to be back on the West Coast and writing about it, which is fun. So I am going to talk for about 20 minutes about this book and the inspiration and research behind the book, and then I'll open it up to questions so we can continue and have a lively discussion. What else did I want to say? Okay, so I'll start by telling you a little bit about the book, and I know some of you probably have read it already and some of you have not, so I won't do any spoilers. So Hotel Laguna is set in 1946, and it tells the story of Hazel Francis, who moves from Wichita, Kansas to Los Angeles, California to work at Douglas Aircraft as one of the Rosie the Riveters. And she loves the work, she's thriving in the position, and then the war is over, the men come back, and the ladies are told, "Thank you for your time and effort, now you can go back to being housewives and mothers." And Hazel is not a housewife or a mother, and she doesn't have much of a family to go back to. So she ends up in Laguna Beach, kind of out of desperation, taking a job working for an old and cantankerous artist, Hanson Radcliffe. And she works for him as an artist/model. And Hanson is haunted by a scandal from his past that involves a Hollywood star. And so Hazel works down in Laguna. She gets very involved in the art world in Laguna Beach, specifically the Pageant of the Masters, which I'm sure many of you know about. And then she becomes determined to uncover this mystery behind her boss's past. And she meets Jimmy, who's a very handsome bartender who works at the iconic Hotel Laguna. And she tries to enlist him to help her uncover this mystery behind her boss's past. But ultimately, it's a story of love and determination and friendship, and the realization that one small decision can change the course of your life in the most unexpected ways. So that's what it's about, without giving away any major spoilers. Okay. There we go. Whoops, too far. Okay. So I first started thinking about this book in the height of COVID. It was spring of 2020. I had just turned in my manuscript for my second book, The Showgirl. And I turned it into my editor, and it was time to start thinking about writing my next book. And I'm just glad it's not mine. That happened to me once. So I was, had just turned in my last book, and I was thinking about what I wanted to write next. Now, usually, at this early stage of writing a book, I would want to go to the place that I'm thinking of writing about. I'd want to hang out in the library, walk the streets, talk to the locals, and do some early preliminary research. But it was COVID. I couldn't travel anywhere physically. So I thought to myself, well, where do I want to live in my imagination for the next year and a half or 2 years or however long it takes me to write this book? And I kept coming back to the idea of Laguna Beach. So I have a lot of fond memories of Laguna Beach. It was the first place I lived right after college, and where I didn't have any roommates for the first time in my life. I had my first job with a paycheck, and so it was the first time that I had my first taste of independence. And also, both of my parents are artists, and my mom paints watercolors, and my dad paints oil paintings, and they've both exhibited in the art galleries and art festivals in Laguna Beach. So I had a bit of a behind-the-scenes knowledge, some scoop about the art world. And so I just envisioned setting scenes in the beautiful bohemian town of Laguna Beach with some quirky characters and some artists, and so that's kind of how it got started. So once I had settled on the time period, sorry, am I going to the next one? Yes, maybe not. Yeah, I think I am on to the next one. Okay, so once I had sort of settled on the setting of Laguna Beach, and I started to do some research and started thinking about the time period that I wanted to write about, which was late 1940s, then I started reading about the 6 million women who worked on the home front during World War II, and I became really fascinated because I was reading about these women who worked in airplane factories and ammunition plants and shipyards, and they took on these jobs that previously had only been reserved for men. And the confidence and competence and earning power of these women working at that time period really changed the American workforce. And I was just fascinated with these women who did these jobs. And so one evening I was talking to my husband. I don't know about you guys, but during COVID, we got into a very bad habit of having a happy hour, cocktail hour every day around 6 o'clock. So it was during one of those happy hours or cocktail hours, and we were making ourselves a Manhattan. We had to break that habit after. But I was telling him about my research that day and about these Rosie the Riveters. And my husband's like, I think that my Grandma Ruth, worked as a Rosie the Riveter. And I was like, Greg, I write historical fiction for a living. You didn't tell me that Grandma Ruth worked as a Rosie the Riveter? Anyway, I immediately got on the phone with my mother-in-law, and Grandma Ruth is no longer with us, so I didn't have the opportunity to meet her in person, but my mother-in-law knew so much about that time in her life. They'd obviously talked about it a lot, and she knew a lot about the stories of her life, and so that's really where the beginning of this character, Hazel, started to come to life for me. And this is Grandma Ruth. I know, and he's amazing. So I got, I learned a lot about her. So she also moved from Wichita, Kansas to Los Angeles, and she worked as a Rosie the Riveter. And she followed her sister and her sister's husband out to LA because they did the same thing and moved and worked at Douglas Aircraft. And so that was really where this character started to come to life for me. Now, I didn't follow her story exactly because she ended up, after the war, getting married, having kids, sort of having a very happy life, and that's no fun to write about in fiction. you guys would get bored. So you like to write some characters with conflict and things like that. But that was where the seed had been planted at that point. So once I knew about Grandma Ruth, then I really started to do some digging and wanted to know more about the Rosie the Riveters, and I learned that there is an American Rosie the Riveter Association with chapters all over the country. Who knew? And so the whole mission of the Rosie the Riveter Association is to preserve the legacy of these women who worked these jobs during World War II and to get their stories written down before it's too late. And so through this organization, through the Orange County chapter of the American Rosie the Riveter Association, I was introduced to some women at an Anaheim senior living home. And so I got to interview them in person several times. And this is us. This is Phyllis, Rusty, and Helen. Phyllis, 102. Rusty is 90, and Helen is 95. Or I might have those two ages. But they were amazing. These women, yes, we should applaud them. So these women were so amazing. They remembered so many details from that time in their life. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I can barely remember what happened last week. They remembered so many details of their life, and I think it's because this time of their life was very impactful to them, and so it's stuck in their mind. And they were able to tell me specifically what it was that they did in these jobs. And one of them worked the hydraulic press, which is this huge piece of machinery that you pull down and it presses sheets of metal into shape to make the aircraft. One of them was a true riveter, Rosie the Riveter. So she used one of the rivet guns that hangs down from the ceiling. It's like a big rivet gun, and she works opposite a bucker, so fastening together, sheets of metal. And one of them, because she was so petite, I think it was Phyllis, she really got into the nose of the aircraft because she could really get in there and do wiring and things like that. So these jobs were so perfect for these women. It was just so great to hear everything that they had to say. And the government would take pictures, like professional pictures of these women working, and put them out there because they wanted other women to see. And they were like, hey, this is what people are doing, and you can do it too. And so there's this great archive of pictures. But also the government put out these posters where they would be like, if you know how to iron, then you also will know how to use the hydraulic press. And if you know how to sew, you'll be great at being a riveter because it's just like sewing together sheets of metal. And it was just so funny how they lured women into these roles, which they probably didn't need that much persuading because they were great in these positions. And so many women enjoyed that time in their life and thrived in these positions. But of course, this is just one part of the story. So much of this story takes place in 1946 in Laguna Beach. And I'm assuming that everyone here has heard of the Pageant of the Masters, and probably many of you have been. But let me tell you, going to South Carolina on book tour and trying to explain to people what the Pageant of the Masters is not so easy. They were like, wait, so what is it again? So for anyone who doesn't know, and there's probably nobody in the room, I'm just going to tell you really quickly. So it's a festival that is held in Laguna Beach, in Laguna Canyon, in an outdoor amphitheater with 2,600 seats. And they're known for putting on vivant tableaus, or living pictures, where real people, they recreate famous classical and contemporary works of art, and with clever application of makeup and costumes and the backdrop, they recreate these vivant tableaus. And they trick your eye into thinking that you're looking at a two-dimensional painting. And it's just such a unique production and so cool, and there's nothing else like it. And so my character, Hazel, gets very involved in the Pageant of the Masters in this book. And what's so cool is when I was finally able to get to the library, because of course it was COVID when I was writing this book, I had been emailing back and forth with the Laguna Beach Historical Society and also with the Laguna Beach Library, a librarian there, and they had been sending me articles. I would ask them questions, and they'd send me what they could. But it wasn't until I was able to actually set foot in the Laguna Beach Library when I got there. And I think they said, wear a mask, and you can be here for 30 minutes, but then you have to leave. And I think I was there for like 3 hours. But the librarian that I'd been emailing with, she came to me with this box, and she was like, I put aside some things for you. And one of them was the original program from 1946 from the Pageant of the Masters. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like gold. And so I quickly, frantically was like turning the pages and taking pictures and turning, because I knew I didn't have time to sit there and read everything. So I was taking pictures so that I could print it all out and read it later. But what was so amazing about that, seeing that program, was that it told me exactly what paintings they produced that year, which were some of these. But also, and maybe even cooler, was that they had articles, explaining how the Pageant of the Masters was put on in 1946. They had behind-the-scenes pictures of, applying the makeup and everything. And they also, what was really cool, is they had advertisements, because it was basically like a magazine. They had advertisements from all the local businesses, so I was able to see what restaurants my characters might go to, where they might go out dancing, where they would, where they might stay, and so it was just a treasure trove. So I love libraries. Thank you. It was so great. And of course, the title of this book is Hotel Laguna. And when I started writing this book, sometimes when you write a book, I don't know what the title is. With my second book, The Showgirl, the whole way through, I had no idea what the title was. But with this book, right away, I was like, it's going to be called Hotel Laguna. And there are things that take place there which, there's a reason why it's called Hotel Laguna, but that's a bit of a spoiler, so I'm not going to get into that. But it is the iconic hotel right in town, and in the book, it's the first place that Hazel, the protagonist, sees when she sets foot off the coach. And so when I was writing it, I thought to myself, at the time, the hotel was closed down, and it had been closed for a few years, and I thought to myself, it's such a shame that this iconic building with all this history, I mean, Humphrey Bogart used to go there, and Lauren Bacall, and a lot of the, Hollywood elite would go down to Laguna Beach as a little escape from the hustle and bustle of Hollywood. And also a lot of movies were filmed in Laguna Beach. I think because of all the varied terrain, you've got the beaches, you've got the hills, and you've got the hotel. And so you could film a lot of different types of scenes there. And I thought, it's such a shame that this hotel is closed down. I'm going to write it back into life in fiction. And so over the course of writing the book, the hotel got bought by somebody else and renovated, and now it's open. So I think I helped write it into life in fiction. I'll take full credit for that. Let's see, is there anything else I didn't tell you yet? Well, I'm sure you all recognize this poster. So with my novels, I tend to always want to write about, my novels tend to have a feminist theme to them. It's always something that I'm drawn to. And I tend to write about strong female characters who are looking at how they're going to fit into the world. And they generally don't want to be boxed into a predetermined role. And so my character, Hazel, that was certainly the case for her in this book. And once she had a chance to do this work and to have a taste of something more, she really was able to dream bigger than she ever imagined. So that's what I like to write about: strong female characters, or at least they end up as strong female characters by the end. So I feel like I've done a lot of talking. I'd love to open it up to you guys for some questions.
What was the turning point in your becoming a best-selling author?
Well, I think getting an agent. When I was writing my first book, I didn't necessarily know that it would be published. And that book took me 4 years to write because I was working as a journalist during the day and I was writing at night, and I would take classes on the side, and I was just enjoying the process. So the whole thing took me a long time. But then when I finished it, I sent it out, not really knowing what would happen. But then I very quickly got an agent, and then she pretty quickly got me a publisher. So I think that was where it all started to happen. So yeah, but you know what? No one has asked me. No one is that it for questions?
Yes,
well,
please.
most people say, what are you working on next? And I'm dying to tell you guys, because my next book is set on Balboa Island. So I figured you guys all know it.
Okay, well, we'll definitely have to bring you back for that.
Yeah, in South Carolina, they were like, okay, great. But I was like, I have to tell you guys it's set on Balboa Island in the 1950s. So that's what I'm working on now.
We will look forward to that.
Yeah.
Nicola, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
and sharing
you.
Your story and your process.
Thank you so much. Oh, can I just say, this is such a wonderful crowd. Can I take a picture of you guys? And if you have a book, would you hold it up?
Hold your books up if you have them.